Victorya Cintra. I'm 26. I'm based in San Francisco now. I was based in LA, which is where I shot Grieving the Girl, this film, about 2 years ago. Two? Yes, summer of 2022. No, it was really amazing to be acknowledged with them because they felt like, you know, we premiered at Oxford Film Fest, which was in um, Mississippi, and that was great. That was like the first festival I'd been to with a film, and it was a really magical experience. But you always want your films to play in a lot of festivals, and I think you know there's so much to it. It's not just about if your film is good or not, right? Like there was like runtime, we could have done better and things like that. So it can be really discouraging, I think, when you're starting out making films and getting like rejection after rejection after rejection. And, I think so it helps when like something like this was just such a great spotlight on it and like, okay, yeah, this film is good, like some of these festivals, it's like they have 100 slots and 4,000 films being submitted. So it's like it can, you get stuck in that rejection. Oh, maybe that film wasn't good enough or whatever. So I think this meant a lot to me to have it acknowledged and, you know, chosen from all these because of what I've mentioned, like the constant rejection. You're just like, well, shit, should I do this again? Because like I don't know if this was worth it. But so yeah, and it was nice to be acknowledged too again with the dark comedy. I feel like sometimes when we had that combination of comedy about a teenage girl and a coming of age story. I feel like with like really or like avant-garde film, like that's just not deep enough or something, but it's like no, it can be. And so being acknowledged for that or like, people enjoying it and seeing the value in it is really nice because I feel like sometimes it goes up against these films. Like when I was at Oxford, you see all these like really deep, sad films. It's like, do we, it just feels like a different comparison. It's like their films can all be different. We should be all watching different kinds, but it feels like a lot of people attach more value to like high-end, deep, sad dramas. It's like we don't have to be sad all the time. It's too much. We can have, we can enjoy comedy and talk about that. So, yeah, and again, I'm not like trying, we need sad and depressing movies. Like we need them. I'm not, but it's like why do I associate that with high end and cinematic and success? Because it's so interesting. I think the recent things that have been like I think of like Succession, right? Like I mean that's like such it's so funny and so I feel like that story wouldn't be as good if it wasn't so ridiculously, absurdly funny.
Guys, meet me in the chapel before class. And wear black. It's serious.
Yeah, I went to college for politics at UVA, and then I also double majored in media studies, and I kind of just got involved in film in college. I always really liked writing and writing stories, and so I knew I kind of wanted to write and direct. And then after college, I moved out to LA and worked for production company, and then assisted a producer. And yeah, so it kind of started like that. I always knew I wanted to write for sure, and then directing I got more involved with and fell in love with. And then then I ended up doing acting as well at first because I had heard that, you know, some of the best directors are actors themselves just because they understand the process and what they're asking of their actors and the people they work with. So I started doing it, and then, you know, lo and behold, I'm here acting, trying to act full time, doing it more. And so, yeah, that's kind of been my background. And so, kind of those three boxes of just writing, acting, and directing.
I got my period this morning.
Congrats!
This is a torture club!
Yeah.
I kind of talked about this in my tidbit a little bit. Not only was sitting and acting and doing acting classes really helpful for my directing, but it just became this weird thing where I would get such inspiration for writing and story ideas in acting classes. I think because you're seeing these stories come to life, you're breaking them down, you're discussing them, that, you know, the ideas flow in there for some reason. And so one day I was sitting in an acting class, and these two girls had just finished like a coming of age scene. They were playing high school students. I even forget what the scene was about, but my teacher was like, you know, as an actor, every coming of age story is essentially a funeral, a death story. Like, you have to mourn your previous way of life to grow up into this new person. And that just, like, totally resonated with me. A light bulb went off where I was like, oh, I really want to do, you know, I love dark comedy and literal interpretation of things. So I wanted to do this story where these girls are just having a funeral because they got their period. And so it kind of came from that, and, you know, wanting to explore, you know, things in literal circumstances. And, you know, most of all of my film is from the female perspective and about, you know, women and what women go through. So I just applied it to that. I've always been really inspired by dark comedies that are done well, right? That like really seem to balance being so hilarious, but then also so emotionally impactful to people, or like start a conversation. And the two that come to mind that I mentioned is Succession, where it's like you're laughing, but you're like, yo, this is politics in America right now. So it's kind of like we're laughing, but it's depressing because it's like, fuck. And then the other one is Fleabag that I love, where it's like, you know, it's so stupidly, absurdly, amazingly funny, and then it's like, then you're kind of crying at it. So I think those have always colored my work of wanting to hit that tone of people are laughing, but then after they're like, oh, it's not really funny, is it, you know? um, and so that, and also just everything told from a woman's perspective, because I don't think we have enough of that. And, you know, I don't really need to go on that tangent because everyone knows we have like no female directors. Well, now we have more, but it's like we need just stories told by women. We don't need more white men telling more, you know, female stories, because there's only so much that you get. And the best honestly, the best compliment I got on this film wasn't even like getting into film festivals or winning this award. It was my aunt who watched the film, and she doesn't even speak English very well, but she understood, and she like went up to me after. She's like, that was my adolescence, that was my childhood, and like you perfectly captured it. And as a filmmaker, like that's should be your goal, right? Like in some way either sparking a conversation or someone going up to you and being like, I don't know how you did it, but you captured and made me feel heard about my experiences. The inspiration is coming from having women be more heard, and drawing from those dark female led comedies like Fleabag. I also love Booksmart by Olivia Wilde. Fucking love that movie. So something like that. Booksmart very much kind of inspired the film in that tone of just like girls just doing stupid girl things that we're not allowed to do because we're forced to become women at like 9 years old. So
Lives?
We're women now!
Exactly.
Okay, but there'll be so many new and exciting things to do as an adult.
Like what, Mila? Like what? Bills? Taxes? Wrinkles?
Pap smears? Childbirth? War vaginas ever know peace? Fuck!
you know, I mean, as you were saying, like production is hell, like production hell. You're just, you know, wondering if you can even get this thing made. We had to crowdfund for it, so it was a whole thing. But I think working with the actors was so fun because we actually became good friends, like, in seeing the progression of, I remember when I first casted them and we did a table read, I got off the Zoom and I'm like, oh my God, that was fucking terrible. Like maybe I casted this incorrectly. But then when you go from 2 months to our last rehearsal, it's like night and day, and that's just the actor's process. And I think that really fell in love with how dedicated we all were and how much it showed in the progress we made in our relationship, on screen as friends. And so that was probably my favorite part, and it was really fun to see and then also experience with them.
Get to class now. Now!
Hey, Dan, think positively. Now that you're a woman, you no longer interest any of the priests.
Detention? After school? Miss Quinn!
Yeah, I mean, money is always a thing, right? Like staying in budget, time, like, I think you can always have more time in pre-production, right? Like you're like, oh, 2 months is fine, and then the deadline is coming, and you're like, well, shit, like we still have all this stuff to figure out. So I think it was that a lot. Like, luckily, I had such great team behind me. Like Karen, my producer, she was amazing and really, supported us and got us through the crowdfunding and solidifying, all the stuff before. And then my DP, Liana, was also amazing. So I think it was just time, like you always are working against that time deadline and then keeping things in budget, which, every filmmaker knows that you're never going to be under. You never have too much money to get the thing done. So, yeah.
Like, really?
You put down Christopher right now. That's sacred.
Women don't have life-size cutouts of boy band members, Dan!
Well, this woman does.
Get it up. I'm sorry. It's for your own good.
It's really funny. I when I started writing and then I I worked with Phantom 4, which is a David Goyer's sci-fi horror company, and I thought I wanted to write horror. And so I was on that leg for a while, and then I just started writing. Like, Grieving the Girl was my first dark comedy, and I fell in love with it. And I think, like, Jordan Peele talks about this, how horror and comedy kind of like, you have to hit certain notes in horror, you have to hit certain notes in comedy, and that's how he compares the two. And I really agree with that. So I felt like I just gravitated more towards comedy or darker comedy and drama, then horror. It just came a little more natural to me. And again, they're similar, right? Like they're completely different, but they're similar in like writing beats and things that you have to hit. So I don't know. I think it just comes naturally to laugh at really serious things for me. And I think I felt like it just translates with audiences sometimes, at least the messages I want to talk about in films, because, when people are laughing, they're enjoying it. And then later, when you're giving them something to think about, they're thinking about it more, if that makes sense. Whereas if it's just a serious film and they feel like they're being lectured to. So, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but it kind of came a little more naturally than doing this horror serious. I think comedy gets I get frustrated because I feel like comedy gets overlooked a lot when it can be, done right. It can be really powerful. Like before horror, I think was, before Jordan Peele came along, made Get Out and Nope, and people were like, oh, horror is just kind of this cheap thing. And then he's like, no, you can actually be saying something about it. And I think comedy, I want to do something similar with that, where I think there's a lot you can play with in that genre.
What if we go to the arcade? They have that really fun new game.
That's child shit, okay?
Let's go to a bar.
And how exactly are we going to get into a bar, Quinn?
Yeah, honestly, it's not something I will do for a long time ever again. I say that because I think if you're directing and acting, you have to be absolutely confident in one or both of your abilities. And at that time, I was not confident in either. So it was really hard because I was in it, I was having to look, framing and then directing them. So now I'm about a year into my really intensive acting training, and I think I would be a lot more confident in doing that because with acting, I have a lot more craft now than I did when I made Grieving the Girl. But even then, I would not do that again because I feel like I'm still learning so much about directing that I want to be in a position to be like, I know 100% what I'm doing directing wise, and I know 100% what I'm doing acting wise. I think if there's questions on both or either, it just makes for, you're not confident, right? You're just not confident what you're doing. There's all this stress about like, am I getting this right or not? So it was a lot, and I don't think I would do that again until, I'm done with my acting training, I have more credits under my belt, or have more films done. It's a lot.
Dear God, what's that?
You got it.
Hey guys, I think I got it.
That's not true. I think I really liked how I directed the girls in Grieving the Girl because it really was about creating the background. It's all about that, right? Like, I think directors need to understand with actors is like it takes time. You're building this character. It's not just you reading lines. And so, it's creating this character from scratch and using experiences, especially like I remember one Zoom I had individually with the girls, and it was like, okay, I want you to think about the first time you had your period. Like, what was that like? Not that you're stealing that memory and putting it into this character, but it's like thinking back onto those emotions or, what that brought up for you. And that was, I remember, being a really fun and informative Zoom call because it was like, how can you incorporate that into the backstory of your character, of where she is at this point. And so I really enjoyed that, of like all the conversations we had. I think as a director, it's important to talk to your actor about how they're approaching building their character, how they're approaching, um, the freedom in being confident in what they're doing. Again, I'm Meisner trained, so a lot of it is about like freedom and truthfulness, and that can only come with having a backstory and being 100% on the same page as your director about what this character actually is, right? It's a living person. You're taking words on a page and making this a human being. Like, we don't come from nothing, right? We have like all this trauma and experiences. Like, you need to build that. So it takes time and patience, and I think directors need to have a lot of patience with their actors on, okay, this is working, this is not working, let's try. Like, you're experimenting. Like, that's why I say the importance of rehearsals or practicing and playing, like just playing. Let's try this. Like, we don't know. The short I just directed, I did that a lot with one of the male actors because we were hitting a wall, it wasn't working, and then I'm like, okay, let's just do this completely different and see what comes out, and it fixed it. So it's like giving them the freedom to work and figure out what makes them tick in this scene, what was triggering them, not in a bad way, but like emotionally in the scene, is you gotta do, or you don't have a scene.
Let's get this money, euros, dollar bills, getting this on out of here. Let's get this money, 1 year and then no, I'm on it.
So for the main character, I met Amran on set for a Chapman short film that we did, and I thought she would be a great fit for it, so I had her audition and brought her on. And then the other girls I just kind of did through backstage. That was before I did Actors Access and kind of did more of that. And yeah, so we just kind of had them do self tapes, and um, it was hard though, because especially when you're doing an ensemble or like a group, you need to make sure they have chemistry together. And so we didn't do those. And so that's why we had those long rehearsals to kind of build that between us. But yeah, I would say that's definitely a challenge when, if it's just one person and they're just having chemistry with themselves, right? Whereas it's like 4 people, you got to make sure this is believable as like a best friend group. And so that was a bit tricky, but yeah.
We look great.
There's no way they'll deny us. We look at least 25.
I'm almost done with my third short, and it's been, as you know, it's just, I think making films is so, so hard, and only people who make them understand that, like, when you get it done, I always liken making films to being pregnant and giving birth, because it's like, it's the most painful, stressful experience. You're like ripping yourself apart to make this art, and you hate it sometimes, the process, but then when you birth the baby, it's like, oh my god, like I have this baby, and then you forget the pain and you do it again. Like, I always think that giving birth is the best analogy to making film. And so yeah, I say that because I have finished my third short that I'm really, really excited about. It's another dark comedy about these women who live in like 5 years from now, where birth control has been abolished in the US, and so they're running an underground birth control pill ring. So we are almost done with it, and I'm really really proud of it. So we'll see how that one does. But yeah, that's what I am currently finishing.
Did you make an exception? We're celebrating.
Celebrating what?
Denai's vagina finally bleeds. Now pour me a shot of your finest rum.
Congrats.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you're asking me that, because I'm like, oh, I feel like I still need words of wisdom. Like, I don't feel like I'm in the position to give anyone advice, but I do say, like, each film you do, you learn something so monumental from. Like, the third short I did this year, oh my god, like, you're learning so much. And I think from Grieving the Girl, the advice I can give from what I learned was that thing that I mentioned about acting. Like, I think a lot of young directors or student directors don't prioritize rehearsals and forming a relationship with your actor, forming that backstory. They're just like, okay, here are your lines, like, show up. I mean, I'm not even speaking from a director standpoint. That's been my experience as an actor on student films. Like, they are just like, okay, great, like, show up, let's do one Zoom rehearsal. And I mean, it can be fine, but you really want the time to have in-person rehearsals, to dig deep with your actor, to do that. It makes a difference in the performance. And I think student directors really neglect the actors when it's like, you want them to be comfortable, you want them to be solid in who they are as the character, because it makes or breaks the film. I think my other advice would just to be like, I think I've seen some like student films where, especially out of school, like, they spend so much money on their shorts, like, and obviously, you know, like I said before, you always need more money, but it's like, it's a short film. How can you make it like more contained and cheaper? Because at the end of the day, you're not making money from this, right? So it's like, I don't know, I've seen people put like obscene amounts of money towards short film, which, if that's what you want to do and you have that, who am I to stop you? But I think, like, containing things so that, you're able to have more freedom when I think there's a lot of money on the line, there's a lot of pressure. So you don't want to have that, and maybe make smaller things, less cast size, stuff like that. I there's less pressure, and you're able to explore and learn more without being like, oh my god, we have like so much money on the line, this has to be perfect. It's not how you want to work.
Does it